Greetings, Michael Didier here. We're continuing in Leviticus. Last week we talked about the Day of Coverings. Gets called Yom Kippur all the time, Day of Atonement. No, don't go with those religious words. It's a day of coverings. We are being covered, but there are lots of coverings that are taking place. Remember, it was the mercy seat that was being covered. It was the tent of meetings that's being covered. It was the altar that's being covered. It was the whole head priest, the high priest, and all his family, the rest of the priests who were being covered, and finally all Israel that was being covered. You know, I looked at this even when I was editing the class last week, and I thought, is this something that the high priest is supposed to do? Yehovah made it very clear, tell Aaron, your brother, not to come just in at any time. He said, thus Aaron shall come into the holy place with the blood. He's the one that's going to put on the holy tunic and the holy trousers. He apparently is in street clothes. But I thought, could this be just any priest? How come in the New Testament it was Zechariah that was going into the holy place? Doesn't make sense. Seems like it's the priest, the high priest that's going in. Well, and so I looked at this a little more carefully this morning, and it does seem to see that it's Aaron who's doing it. Thus, Aaron shall come into the holy place. Aaron. He's the high priest. I don't know if a regular priest can do this stuff. At any rate, we talked about this at length last week. I want to get started on what we're going to do this week. This is extremely important stuff. A few weeks ago, we talked about Leviticus 11. We talked about the clean meat that Israel's seed are allowed to eat. Do you remember? We talked about the behemoth, the four-footed animals that had to have divided hooves and have to chew their cud. We talked about the fish that have to have fins and scales. Not the fish, the things that are in the water that have fins and scales. Those are the things that we can eat. We talked about the birds. And we saw that there was categories of birds that we are not allowed to eat. All the rest, it appears, we're allowed to eat. Again, somebody said something this week about chicken. They say it about duck on a regular basis. Is a chicken or a duck? How does a chicken and a duck fit into any of these animals? Is it ostrich kind? Is it seagull kind? Kite kind? Falcon kind? Eagle kind? Vulture kind? No, it doesn't fit. It's clean. Finally, we talked about the bugs, the creeping things. Well, I say all this because this is clean and unclean meat. Remember, we were talking about clean being tehor, that which is in line with presenting Yehovah's image on the earth, and tameh, that which is not in line with presenting Yehovah's image on the earth. Most people, messianic, I hate to even use that word, messianic, Hebrew roots people understand Leviticus 11, but they haven't a clue about Leviticus 17 and how it relates to Leviticus 11. They don't know about Leviticus 3, the Shalomim instructions. They don't know what it says in Leviticus 7 about the Shalomim instructions. And because of that, we go to the grocery store and we buy what we think is clean meat. I think we're bringing damnation on ourselves and getting ourselves kicked out of Israel, and we don't even know it. Is ignorance bliss? If we don't know it, will Yahovah let it slide somehow? What if we start to hear about it and we stop saying, I don't want to know about that? That's the ignorance. Because it's not bliss, it's deadly. It's going to get you killed. Because failing to understand what Yahovah is talking about in Leviticus 17 is going to get a man, whether he is a native-born man in Ezra, one of Israel's seed, aka the children of Israel, or the Ger, who dwells with them, kicked out from among his people. Well, let's go to Leviticus 17. In this chapter, we have basically 5 instructions regarding meat we are to eat. The meat we eat. Why are these instructions completely ignored? Do we read through this and really not take the time to understand it? I really think it is. And part of it is the language that is inserted into the text. In a sense, I feel like it's a little bit of a misdirect. Oh, Satan would love to have Yahovah's people misdirected, especially as it relates to the meat we eat and things that get us kicked out from among his people. Would that make sense? I think it does. Well, we have much that we've got to learn today. This has multiple levels of understanding that I'm going to try to relate to many verses throughout the scriptures. Remember, it's about line upon line. It's about precept upon precept. Here a little, there a little. We look at clean foods, chapter 11, and think, that's it. Folks, it's not it. There's more to the story. So we talked about 5 statutes regarding the killing of animals and blood. This is what we're talking about today. Can somebody else, as a man of Israel, kill my food and it be okay? Are there some cases where that might be okay? If there is, I think it's precious few. Let's talk about some of this today. Here's the 5 statutes, just briefly. Leviticus 17, 1 through 7. It says instructions on how domestic meats from the herd and from the flocks. Remember, when we talk about herd, we're talking about cattle, ox, cattle. When we talk about flocks, zeon, we're talking about sheep and goats. This is about how domestic meats from the herd or the flocks are to be treated and not treated. There are some things that we're supposed to do. There are some things that we're not supposed to do. We've got to understand it. The next section is Leviticus 17, 8 through 9. All domestic slaughters. Talks about the olah and domestic slaughters and the olah. In or near the camp of the herds and of the flocks are to be brought to Yahovah. We're supposed to bring them to Yahovah. But we're going to see today there is a caveat in here. It says in or near the camp. That's going to be a significant issue that we've got to clear up. Next, he's going to talk about blood, the treatment of clean wild animals, and finally, the treatment of meat that dies of itself or is torn by beasts. Oh, we have lots and lots to talk about today. Do you remember we talked about the shalamim. It's the slaughtered shalamim. Slaughtered shalamim. It says zavek shalamim. In many of the places that gets translated the sacrifice of the peace offering. It's the slaughtered shalamim. Every place that it says sacrifice in this chapter is slaughtered. Many of the times that it says slaughtered, it's going to be made out to be offer or bring. It's slaughtered. We have got to understand that when something is slaughtered, it is eaten. We kill it and eat it. That's what a slaughter is all about. And this is what we're talking about right now. The meat that is coming from Israel, the ox, the lamb, the goat, the herds, and the flocks. How is it supposed to be slaughtered? I wish we talked about, it says see my topic note on Zavek. Let me go there for just a moment, see what we got. I am going to come back to this guilt of bloodshed. That's something that we've definitely got to get. But let's take a look at Zavek really quick. Zavek, slaughter. Most translations erroneously translate Zavek as sacrifice. But a Zavek is a slaughter of an animal from the herd of the flock. It can be either male or female. It is always used for food by the men who slaughtered it. Some of it even goes to the priests. Well, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we're going to see, were all involved with both slaughters and olah, offerings. Here, let's take a look at this. This is Genesis 31:54. And Abraham's Elohim, Nahor's Elohim, and their father's Elohim judged between us. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father's Isaac. Then Jacob slaughtered a slaughter on the mountain and called his brethren to eat food. Do you remember what was going on here? This is when Jacob had left Nahor, and Nahor went after him. He's caught him. He was going to kill him. Bring his daughters back. Bring his grandsons back. And his granddaughter. But Yahovah protected him. Really rebuked him. They made a slaughter to commemorate the oath that they had both taken. And they both ate that meat. That was a slaughter. Here is Exodus 3. Then they will heed your voice, and you shall come, you and the elders of Israel, to the king of Egypt, and you shall say, Yahovah Elohim of the Hebrews has met with us. Now please let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may slaughter to Yahovah our Elohim. We are to slaughter to Yahovah our Elohim. Who were they slaughtering to in Egypt? We'll find out some things today. So they said, the Elohim of the Hebrews has met with us. Please let us go 3 days' journey into the desert and slaughter to Yahovah our Elohim. Here it says in 5:8, let us go to slaughter to Elohim. See, it gets translated as sacrifice to Elohim, and we don't understand what's going on. A slaughter is something that we're going to eat. This chapter is all about the food that we're going to eat. Well, let me see if there's something that really stands out here. Oh, we'll talk about that one later. Let's stop for now. Let's go to verse 2. That was, and Jehovah spoke to Moses, saying, speak to Aaron and to his, what does it say? Speak to Aaron and to his sons and to all Israel's seed and say to them, and to all Israel's seed and say to them, who are we talking to? We're talking to men. Israel's seed are not the children of Israel. They're the Ezra men. We're going to see that over and over and over today. We're going to see, without a doubt, who the house of Israel is, who the Ezra, the native born, are, how they relate to B'nai Israel. Oh, we have some very interesting things to see. This is every bit as good as what I've shown you in Leviticus 23 as it relates to the Ezra and the B'nai Israel being the one and the same. We're going to see it again today, very clearly. Let's just continue. Look what he says. This is so interesting. Any man. You read this. You don't know it says ish ish. You know what? There's no lady ish. There's only men ish. Ish ish. Remember we talked about Kodesh Kodeshim. This is ish ish. Kodesh Kodeshim said most holy. Holy, holy, most holy. This is ish ish, or any man. We could say it like that. But look what it says. Any man of Israel's house who kills, shakats, gotta shakat it, that's part of the slaughter, who kills cattle or lamb or goat. That's the herd and the flocks. Look what it says, in the camp. Or who kills it outside the camp. We're slaughtering our animal in the camp or outside the camp. This is for the house of Israel. Any man, ish ish, of Israel's house. Of course, they're all men. Let me read this. It says, this is for the house of Israel. Israel's seed, the Ezra. We will see that while the stranger dwells with the Ezra, he has no land and thus no domestic animals of his own. Doesn't have land. Not allowed to have land. He's not an Ezra man. Ezra man, get it. We expand our gates. Remember it said, add to your tents. So that all these other guys can come and they're going to be moved out. People are coming to us. They're becoming Ezra man and they're getting their own land. I want you to see something. This is just amazing. If you look at these, remember I said 5 statutes. Each statute, except the last one, begins with the words ish, ish. Man, man. Usually translated any man or whatever man. We're talking about men. There are no lady ish. Let's now look at the enlightening progression of these statutes. Took me a while to find this. Here it says, man, man, among the house of Israel. That's how the first section starts. The second section starts, and ish, ish, and any man among Israel's house, and among the stranger who dwells with you. The stranger dwells with Israel's house. But now it gets more interesting. Well, actually, I guess I got to go a little bit further to get that much more interesting. Here it says, and any man among a house of Israel and among the stranger, Ger, who dwells with you. That's the third section, how it begins, talking about any man, ish, and ish. Among Israel's house and among the stranger. But now, look at what it says. Oops, I better fix that. I-S-R-A-E, Israel's. Add some old language in there. Now it says, the fourth section, the fourth statute in 13, and ish, among Israel's seed. Israel's seed is what's always getting translated as the children of Israel. I'm sure they translated this as the children of Israel here. Yes, whatever man of the children of Israel. Not the children of Israel! We're talking about any men among Israel's seed, aka the sons of Israel. Even worse, the children of Israel throws everything off. And among the stranger who dwells with you. Okay, so Israel's seed, now we can see, is the same as the house of Israel, Israel's house. You see how that works together? When we talk about Israel, we're talking about Israel's seed. But it goes even deeper than that, because look at what the next section says and the last section says. And every person, now they don't say man on this one. Every person, whether he is a native of your own country, that's how they translated one word. Ezra. Remember we talked about it's about the Ezra and the Ger. The Ezra are the ones who received the commandments. They are the house of Israel. They are Israel's seed. Now it says the same thing. The native of your own country or the stranger who dwells with you. What are we seeing here? Do you understand the implications of what I'm showing you right now? This is really important. Most people won't see this. Most people don't want to see this. They're perfectly happy not knowing about the Ger and the Ezra. They figure a person born in the land is somebody who's born in the land. But all the Israel that he's talking about right here has not even seen the land. It's not about being born in the land. It's about being a spiritual birth into a spiritual country. Jehovah's kingdom. What are we seeing here? There are only two kinds of men in Jehovah's kingdom, the Ezra and the Ger. Look at the progression. What does this tell us? What this tells me is that the house of Israel, Israel's seed, and the native of your own country, or Ezra, are all synonymous phrases. Oh my goodness. Oh my Elohim, you're so good. Thank you for revealing these things to us. And again, they are all men. Men. We're going to see today that it's men who do the slaughter. Not ladies. You know, I can't see a place in the scriptures where a woman kills anything. Nothing. A woman doesn't kill things, animals or men. They don't go to war. Oh yeah, we'll see some foreign woman put a peg through somebody's head. But that's not what we're talking about. This is not supposed to be. Again, here's the word we're talking about, shakat. They want to say slaughter. It's kill. It's kill. We can kill something for slaughter, but they're translated as slaughter. I don't think it does justice to it. Here's kosher. According to the laws of Torah, to be eaten, a kosher species must be slaughtered by a shakat or a shaket. a ritual slaughterer. Since Jewish law prohibits causing any pain to an animal, the slaughter has to be effected in such a way that unconsciousness is instantaneous. Unconsciousness is instantaneous, and death occurs almost instantaneously. I would like to see how that's done by slitting their throats, that it's instantaneous. So, whatever man of the house of Israel, again, remember, this is only the house of Israel right now, who kills an ox or lamb or goat in the camp or outside the camp. That's pretty significant. We're going to see as we move through these instructions. I missed it the first time around. And because of that, I entered into some conclusions that weren't quite as succinct that I would like for them to be. And does not bring it. So here we're killing something, ox, lamb, goat, in the camp or outside the camp. But we're not bringing it to Yehovah, and does not bring it to the door of the tent of meetings. It's not the tabernacle, it's the tent of Moed. That's what we're talking about. To bring an offering, now here, I've got it here, and bring it, the animal, not to the door of the tent of meeting, to bring his, this is the korban that we're always talking about. This is the bring, karav, to bring, see, they say, offer his offering. Isn't that what it said? Offer his offering. To bring his korban. Offering's a good word for korban. I like korban to be made an offering. Remember, korban is all about drawing near to Yehovah. This is what it's about, drawing near to Yehovah. Acknowledging who it is who gave us the lamb or the goat or the ox. It comes from Yehovah. It gives us the fruit of the ground. Well, let's read what the rest of it says. Well, actually, that was my words. I put his offering, korban, with the fat and the blood, unto Yehovah, before the presence of Yehovah. The blood which the man shed shall be imputed on him, and that man shall be cut off from among his people. What are we seeing here? This is a man who has slaughtered an ox or a sheep or a goat in the camp or outside the camp. Didn't bring it to Yehovah as a shalamim. Didn't bring it. That's what a shalamim is. Something that we're bringing for food. You know, when we had the story of in the New Testament, the story of what do we call it? The son who went off, took his inheritance and gave it to the pig and spent it wildly, and then finally came back and repented. I can't think of when we talk about that, but he slaughtered a goat or a sheep or an ox for his son. And they had a big feast. This is what we're talking about when we do these things. If it comes to Yehovah, we got to eat it within a day or two at the most. Usually within a day. That's what the shalamim is all about. We had 4 different kinds of korban, or offerings that a man can bring to Yehovah. The asham is kind of part of, you could almost do part 4.A for the kata'ah, is the asham. But this third one here, we were talking about the shalomim, the peace or thanksgiving offering. The toda, I think is what they called it, the toda. Again, we're talking about ox or lamb or goats, herds or flocks. I think we bring our domestic animals to Yehovah. Not once we slaughter them, to slaughter them. To slaughter them, they're going to be slaughtered before him. The problem with not bringing him before him is the blood's going to be on us. Oh, Father, we don't want the blood on us. As a reminder that he brings his Ezra, the increase from the herds of the flocks. Well, that's pretty much what I just said, isn't it? Thou will keep him in perfect peace, keep his mind stayed on thee, because he trusts in thee. Guilt of bloodshed. Look at that. They use guilt of bloodshed here. Guilt of bloodshed, you see that? The guilt of bloodshed shall be imputed on that man. That Ish. Does not bring it to the door of the tabernacle of meetings. Let's take a look at it and see what this says for sure. Before the presence of Yehovah, they said, the guilt of bloodshed shall be imputed on that man. It says, the blood. Not guilt of bloodshed, that's not there. Words are being added that don't belong. The blood shall be upon that man. Didn't do it right. And that man shall be cut off from among his people. Do you hear what's happening here? We're eating meat that was not brought to Yehovah when we were in the camp or outside the camp. To the end that Israel's seed may bring their slaughters, which they slaughter in the open field, or really, listen, here's what I translated it to the end, that Israel's seed may come with their slaughters. Follow me on the left here so you can see what's being changed. With their slaughters, here's the Zavik. Their slaughters, which they slaughtered. Again, Zavik. One is a noun, one is a verb. In the open field. And come to Yehovah, to the door of the tent of meeting, to the priest. And he, the man, shall slaughter his slaughtered shalomim to Yehovah. We were slaughtering it on our own. But we have the ability to bring it to Yehovah because we're in the camp or outside the camp. 4 times this verse uses the word zavik and never translates it correctly. They translate it as sacrifices. They translate it as offer. They translate it as offer again and offerings. Zavik is a slaughter. Verse 6. And the priest shall sprinkle the blood on the altar of Yehovah, Yehovah's altar, at the door of the tent of meeting, and shall burn the fat for a sweet aroma to Yehovah. We saw those instructions when we read Leviticus 3 on the korban called the shalomim. Let me read on the left here, on the right I mean. The priest shall sprinkle the blood on the altar of Yehovah at the door of the tent of meeting, and burn the fat for a sweet aroma to Yehovah. Actually, was a pretty good translation. They just had the tabernacle that they made out of the Ohel tent. Now, look at this. This is where the rubber begins to meet the road, and where much of our misunderstandings pervert true understandings. It says, they shall no longer slaughter their slaughterings they put demons. Offer their sacrifices, slaughter their slaughterings to demons. The word that they're using here for demons, I had somebody do this to me last week. I don't know if you saw it, maybe you didn't. I usually erase bad information from comments. I don't even want to deal with it. Obviously, he didn't read it, didn't listen to what I had to say. He just flat out said that the goat that goes away was a demon goat, because this word gets translated often as devil in the scriptures. Do you see this? Shaggy or shaggy is what it says. And as a noun, a he-goat. By analogy, a fawn. Then it says devil, goat, hairy, kids, rough, satyr. Satyr. The word is sair. But because, he looks at this and he can't discern, remember, everything after the dash is how it's translated. It's not the definition, it's just how it's translated. Gotta understand the difference. But even this is a really poor translation. It comes from this word, oh, you can't even see it here. It comes from this word here, 8175. I looked at that word. Let's go to it just for the heck of it. That's the Strong's. 8175. Storm, by implication, to shiver, that is fear. The last time we saw this word translated was in the last chapter. Do you remember that? Here's the word again. Sair. The place that we saw it was right here. Look at this. The last time we talked about shaggy goat was in the last chapter. One died and the other lived. Remember, we were picking two goats. I think they represent the strong goats. Remember, we talked about it last week. We were talking about the good shepherds first about the bad shepherds who destroy and scatter the sheep of their pastures. And then Yehovah says he's going to give them good pastures. I think that when we were talking about those two sair goats, here's what they use. And he shall take from the congregation of Israel's seed. Remember, they're coming from Israel's seed. These are men. These aren't devils. It says sair az. Goats. It probably says azim. Azim. Sair azim. As a sin offering. Oh, and one ram is a burnt offering. Two goats. One of them is going to be the sin offering. Remember that? We talked about how Yehovah, what does it say? The heart is deceitful above all things, desperately wicked. I, Yehovah, search the heart. I test the mind, even to give every man, according to his deeds, according to the fruit of his actions. I think we're talking about men when we're talking about sair. Let's take a look at it. Because look what we're talking about here. They shall no more slaughter their slaughterings to sair, the strong goat. I put this. Those who sow to the flesh, or maybe I said it here. Where did I say it? Oh, here it is. I'm going to suggest that this word sair is symbolically flesh. Flesh. bear with me for a moment, okay, and see if you see what I see. Those that sow to the flesh will reap corruption. They get kicked out of Israel. But they that sow to the Spirit, by bringing their ox, their sheep, their goat to Yehovah, reap eternal life. They weren't doing it the way they were supposed to do it. We talk about halal meats. Well, can we eat halal meats? Can we eat kosher meats? You know, halal, I would say, probably is not a good idea. As I understand halal, they're going to turn the animal to face Mecca. They're not invoking Yehovah's name. They're invoking Allah. You could argue that Allah and God are the same, but neither one is Yehovah's name. I want you to see what the first thing that James said. Do you remember? I think it was Paul and Silas that were having a great dispute, or maybe it was Peter, I don't know, having a great dispute with the brethren in another country, maybe another city. And it was all about whether or not they were supposed to circumcise the new ger. Some said they had to circumcise the ger. They have to bring an offering. And James, the head of the council in Jerusalem, the head of the called out church, the Ezra men, came up with really 4 things. He says 4 things. Most say 4 things. It's 5 things. And this is what they were. Let me just read them to you. These are about the Gentiles who are turning to Yehovah and becoming ger. They're leaving the kingdom of their birth to become ger. He says this, therefore I judge that we should not trouble those from among the Gentiles who are turning to Elohim. Once you turn to Elohim, you're not a Gentile anymore. But that we write to them 4 things. 5 things. Look at what the first one is. Abstain from things polluted by idols. Idols. Things strangled and blood. Why is he choosing these things? Because these are things that get you kicked out of Israel. We want to keep the ger in Israel so they can learn how to do Yehovah's statutes and judgments and ordinances without getting kicked out. So the first thing he's going to tell them is not to do the things that get you kicked out of Israel. And one of those is the meat that we choose to eat. Paul later on says, don't ask where the meat came from. Ridiculous. We got to know where the meat came from. Some meat has to be eaten in a day. If it was brought to Yehovah, it's got to be eaten in a day. If it was brought as a vow, if it was brought as a voluntary offering, it's got to be eaten in 2 days. And if you don't eat it, if you eat old meat older than 2 days, get you kicked out of Israel. Your sin shall remain on you. Don't go there. But look at what this says. We have to understand juxtaposition. It says, they shall no more slaughter their slaughterings to Sayer. Remember, I said those are probably the strong ones in the land. The flesh. Those are the ones who have given us the meat. I think I wrote about in my articles. Let me show you where those articles are at. I want you to read these. If you haven't read them before, you need to read them. They're really important. They are here on my blog. We Are Israel. And you can find them right here. It's about the food. There it is, clean food. See that down there at the bottom? Meat sacrificed to idols. We have learned lies by translating this as idols. Was Israel doing anything in the camp when they were slaughtering outside the camp? The opposite of what they were doing was bringing it to Jehovah. If they didn't bring it to Jehovah, what they were doing was wrong. Got to read the articles. They'll give you some light. Look what it says here. Then they shall know or slaughter their slaughterings to demons, to Sair, after whom they have played the harlot. Hear that? After whom they have played the harlot. Who are they playing the harlot with? When we talk about Israel playing the harlot, who are we talking about? I am not prepared to go here, but I'm going to try to see if I can find it. I think it is Ezekiel 16 or 37. Let me just look at 16 first. You are an adulterous wife. Talking about Israel. You are an adulterous wife who takes strangers instead of her husband. The wife gets her meat from her husband. But you're an adulterous wife who takes strangers instead of her husband. You make payments to all harlots, but you made your payments to your lovers and hired them to come to you from all around in your harlotry. You are the opposite of a woman in harlotry. You're worse than a harlot, is what he's saying. And that you gave payment, but no payment was given you. Therefore, you are the opposite. We are getting our food from someplace other than our husband. Or if we're the man, ourselves. It appears to me that we're supposed to supply that food. Could we buy the food from somebody else and slaughter it? Yes, of course. I don't see any problem with that. Oh, and here they were talking about things strangled. We're going to talk about the blood today. Let me just say this. If the animal is strangled, the blood is still in the animal. Doesn't leave the animal. And we don't want to eat that kind of meats. So that's the first section that we're going to go through. Remember, we're talking about any man, whether he is Ezra or Agar. Not talking to any Gentiles. So don't think I'm talking to you if you're a Gentile. Not talking to Israel. See, this is why we want to become Agar and then become the Ezra at Passover. If we're not Agar or an Ezra, we're nothing. We're a Gentile. He didn't give any instructions to Egypt. They were back on the other side of the sea. No, we got things that we've got to learn. So here he goes again. Verse 8. He says, this is the second statute now. Any man who brings an olah or shalamim and does not bring it to the door of the tabernacle of meetings, any man who brings an olah or a shalamim and does not bring it to the door of the tent of meeting shall be cut off from among his people. Here, this is what we're talking about. Again, ish. And any man from Israel's house, and the ger who dwells with thee, who raises up an olah or a zavek, well, actually, that's not even that won't be a slaughter. That's got to be a shalamim. Let me look it up. 8, compare an olah or a zavek, a slaughter. It is a slaughter, or a slaughter. Wow, didn't expect that. Maybe I already saw that, but now we know. We're talking about an olah or a slaughter. When we talk about olah and something else, it's usually shalamim, isn't it? Here they're talking about a slaughter. Isn't that interesting? Well, and shalamim is a slaughter, isn't it? Something that we are going to eat. Oh, I like this. Any man of the house of Israel and the Ger who dwells with thee, who raises up. What did they put? Who brings a burnt offering. Man, the offering's added. Burnt is the olah, and it doesn't say offers, it says raises up. Who raises up? Remember, the word that they're using is Allah, the olah. We're going to Allah, the olah. Raise up the sweet aroma to Yahovah. We do that with the olah because it's a burnt offering, but we also do it with the fat of the shalomim. That's a sweet aroma to Yahovah. Oh, there's the olah. There's the slaughter. One of the commandments. Do you remember when Yahovah gave us his 10 commandments, Exodus 20? I am Yahovah who brought thee out from the land of Egypt. You shall have no other Elohim besides my face. The meat that we eat is not done Yahovah's ways. The blood doesn't go into the ground. Most of the blood is sold off for other things. These are the big corporation deals that we're using right now. But they're slaughtered in accordance with what? The USDA, which is a part of the Elohim of the land. And it is their instructions that tell us how to do the slaughtering of our meat. But Yahovah brought us out from among them. You shall have no other Elohim before my face. That's what it says. Look at what he says. This is, after he gave us the 10 commandments, he said this. An altar of earth you shall make to me, and you shall slaughter on it your olah and your shalomim, your flocks and your oxen. In all the places my name shall be remembered. Look at this is the blessing. He's telling us what to do. Then he says, in all the places where my name shall be remembered. Zakar, I will come to you and bless you. When we bring it to Yahovah, we get a blessing. But we don't have a tabernacle. We don't have any of that right now. But here he says you can build an altar. I will come to you and bless you. And if you make me an altar of stone, you shall build it of hewn stone. For if you use a tool on it, you have profaned it. Could we build an altar to Yahovah to bring our slaughters to him on? The question is it something that we have to do? I remember, well, let me just see if this, let me just show you some things here. Here's Noah. It says, Noah built an ark, built an altar to Yahovah, and took every clean animal of every clean bird and offered olah on the altar. No offerings. So Abraham took the wood of the olah and laid it on Isaac, his son. And he took the fire in his hands and the knife, and the two of them went together. Isaac's carrying up his own food, his own wood that he's going to use Isaac for an olah. Do you remember what happened? This whole story, very interesting story in Yasher. Yahovah is having a discussion with Satan. And he's saying, have you seen Abraham? He's excited. Abraham's son is being weaned today. Having a big party. Everybody came. The kings are there. All the people from Haran came down. And Satan criticizes Abraham to Yehovah, saying that he hasn't done any burnt offerings or any olah offerings to you. I'm sorry, olah or shalamim to you. Now that he's got his son, he's not doing it anymore. What's up with that? And basically, Elohim says that if I asked him to kill his son, Abraham is so faithful, he would kill his son. Isaac had just gotten through talking with his brother, and his brother was bragging about how he got circumcised when he was 14 years old. And what a big deal that was. And he says, it's a piece of skin, a little piece of skin. It doesn't mean anything. If Jehovah wanted to take me, I'd be his burnt offering. Well, Jehovah took him at his word, and here we are, proving to Satan what's going on. Remember, Satan tried to get him to not do it. Well, neat story. Anyway, then he sent young men of Israel's seed who offered burnt offerings. This is right after he told us to build an offering in Genesis 20. Now the young men, here's the young men in 24. Then he sent young men of Israel's seed who offered burnt offerings, olah, and slaughtered shalamim. Zavak shalamim of oxen to Yehovah. To who? To Yehovah. You know what I see here? And I'm sure that my woman, Carissa, Raya, I'm sure that Veronica feels the same way. I know you both love animals. You know what? Yehovah loves animals. He knows they're for food. If they're domestic animals, sheep, goat, clean animals, they're for food. But you know what? He cares about them. I think he cares so much about them that he wants the man who eats them to be the man who slaughtered them. Do you see that in these writings today? I hope that you do. It's not about somebody else killing our meat. If we're a man, an Ezra man, or a Ger, hey, no problem. If you're a Gentile, have at it. You got so far to go, you're lost anyway. But this is why we got to become the Ger and then the Ezra. So we have that relationship with Yehovah. I want to show you something. I know. Am I taking too much time? I think there's only 17 verses, and we're going to go faster. Let me go to Psalms. Yes, 50 verse 5. Look what he says. Gather my saints together. You know what that word is? It's this word right here. Kasid. Whoops, not there. Here it is. Kasid. My kind. My kind. Gather my kind. I am spirit Elohim, and these are spirit men. My kind. Look what it says. Gather to me my kind, who cut covenant. Cut. Here's the word we're talking about. Karat. Covenant, barith, with me by Zavik. Slaughter. This is what we're talking about. The slaughter that we're talking about is Passover. We've got to become Yehovah's kind, his saints. It's too bad that they don't call him Kasid. They call him my saints. It misdirects us, and we fail to see the really cool things. So here we are. Also, and I'm sorry, it doesn't say also. You may also should say, and whatever man of Israel's house, and the Ger who dwells among thee, who raises up an olah or a slaughter, 9, and does not bring it to the door of the tent of meeting, and comes not to make it to Yehovah, the man shall be cut off from among his people. Shall be cut off. The punishment for a violation of this commandment is to be cut off, destroyed from Yehovah's people. Well, this is going on to the next verse. And unto the opening of the tent of meeting does not come to make it to Yehovah, that man shall be cut off from among his people. Well, I had a question. Remember, this is about what? This is about the man who is, where do we see that? In or near the camp. Here it is. In the camp, or who kills it outside the camp. Didn't bring it to Yehovah. That's what we're talking about. You're supposed to bring it to Yehovah. Still on 9. My question is, what if the camp is not near us? What do we do? We can make an altar to Yehovah. That's what I saw. That's what I thought the only conclusion was. Make an altar to Yehovah if I wanted to have ox or sheep or goat, oxen or flocks. Build an altar, slaughter it to him. He told us he would bless us. He will bless us. But what if the camp is not near us? We're not in it. We're not outside it. We can't. We don't have any place to bring it. Well, look what Yehovah says in Deuteronomy 12:20. Here's what it says. When Yehovah thy Elohim enlarges thy borders, as he has promised thee, and thou say, let me eat meat. Look at that. We're not eating meat. Why aren't we eating meat? Because we can't bring it to Yehovah, and we won't want to have the sin come on us. Yehovah is providing a remedy. When Yehovah thy Elohim enlarges thy borders as he has promised thee, and thou say, let me eat meat, because thou longs to eat meat, thou may eat as much meat as thy heart desires. He says, if the place where Yehovah thy Elohim chooses to put his name is too far from thee, well, we have a problem. It's way too far from me because it doesn't even exist right now. Then thou may slaughter from thy herds and from thy flocks, which Yehovah has given thee, just as I have commanded thee, and thou shalt eat within thy gates as much as thy heart desires. Just as the gazelle and the deer are eaten. Hear that? The gazelle and the deer are what? Wild, clean animals. Just as the gazelle and the deer are eaten, so thou may eat them. Eat what? Eat the ox and the sheep and the goats. Only be sure that thou do not eat the blood, for the blood is in the life. Thou may not eat the life with the meat. Thou shalt not eat it. Thou shalt pour it out on the earth like water. Oh, so interesting. What is that saying? Appears to me that we can buy our meat and slaughter it ourselves. And unlike the meat that we bring to Yehovah, which we saw in Leviticus 7, we don't have to eat it within a day. We don't have to eat it within 2 days. There are no regulations. In fact, I remember in here, wasn't it in here? Only be sure. Yes, the unclean and the clean alike may eat them. the unclean and the clean alike may eat them. The herd and the flocks. Just as the gazelle and the deer are eaten. If we don't have those limitations on us, then if we have a freezer, we could freeze that meat. We can can that meat. We already could do it for gazelle, for deer, other clean wild meats. But if the place where Jehovah has his name, remember, we don't have a place right now where his name exists. It looks to me like we're free. But what do we got to make sure? That we kill it. And 2, that the blood is put in the ground and covered. That's it. The clean and the clean may eat it. Don't even have to be clean. Remember, with the slaughtered shalamim, you can only eat it if it's clean. If it touches somebody dirty, then you have to destroy the meat. Nobody gets to eat it. I said dirty. Unclean. Tameh. Then nobody gets to eat it. Well, now here he's going to talk about the blood. Leviticus 17:10. And whatever man. Here we are again. Ishish. And Ishish. Among the house of Israel and among the Ger who dwells with you, who eats any blood, I will set my face against that soul who eats the blood, and he shall be cut off from among his people. Is this a new commandment? You know what? So much of what we think is new commandments isn't. Look at this. But flesh, this is Genesis 9. This is right after we came out of the ark. But flesh, with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, ye shall not eat. Telling Noah not to eat the flesh with the blood. It shall be a perpetual statute for you, for your generations. It shall be a perpetual statute for your generations throughout all your dwellings, that ye eat neither fat nor blood. Leviticus 3. That's talking about the shalamim statute. The meat that we eat. This prohibition against eating, drinking blood is not new to Israel's seed. What is new, however, is the explanation given in in verses 11 and 12. That's where we're going next. Here they are. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make a covering for your souls. When we're in the camp, and we bring our slaughters to Jehovah's face and slaughter them there, the blood that's being put on the altar is a covering for us. For it is the blood that maketh a covering for the soul. Therefore I said to Israel's seed, no soul shall eat blood, neither shall any Ger who sojourns among you eat blood. So he talks about the soul, no soul. He's talking about the Ezer man, and the Ger who dwells with you, sojourns with you, gores with you, shall not eat blood. And again, we go right back to Acts 15 when we were talking about the 5 things. Abstain from things polluted by idols, sexual immorality. We're going to talk about that next week in chapter 18. Things strangled, and blood. For Moses has had throughout generations those who preach him in every city, being read in the synagogues every Sabbath. Hear that? They go and keep the Sabbath. That's the 5th thing. All right. So we covered that. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it upon the altar to cover your souls. For it is the blood that covers, there's the word kafar, that covers the soul. Kafar is what the Day of Coverings was all about. That covers your nefesh, thy flesh. All right, let's go to 12. We're going to make it here just fine, I think. Therefore I said to Israel's seed, no one among you shall eat blood, nor shall the stranger. I'm sure it's the stranger. Nor shall the stranger, nor the stranger who dwells among you eat blood. Boy, look at how many times he said that about eating blood. Do you think he's serious about it? Again, man. This is the fourth statute. And any man, whatsoever man, and whatsoever man, could say it like that. Among Israel's seed. Now they use Israel's seed, not the house of Israel or Israel's house. So interesting. And the ger who dwells with them. Who's them? The Ezraman, Israel's seed. Who hunts and catches a living thing, or a bird which may be eaten. He shall pour out the blood and cover it with earth. That's all it says. He says that may be eaten. A bird that which may be eaten. Again, going back to Leviticus 11, we got to understand the things that can be eaten. You see how one relates to the other? We don't have clean animals if we don't understand what's clean foods. But then we got to talk about how it's slaughtered. Any man among Israel's seed and among the ger who dwells among them hunts and catches living thing, or a bird which may be eaten, he shall pour it out of the blood and cover it with earth. Wild game does not have to be brought to the tent of Moed. Well, this is exactly what we were seeing from Deuteronomy when it said, if the place where Yahweh places his name is too far from us. If it takes us 2 days to get there to do a shalomim, we can't eat it at home. We'd have to eat it in Jerusalem. Okay, we're having a feast, but everybody's got to go to Jerusalem. Don't work very well, does it? Because got to eat it in 1 day. Wild game does not have to be brought to the tent of Moed. The blood is poured out on the ground and covered. And since this is not used as a shalomim, those restrictions do not apply. Again, it can be eaten by the clean and the unclean. Where did it say that? I don't remember it saying that. Not for the meat here. And since it is used as a shalomim, no restrictions for it to apply. Let's just see. Who hunts and catches a living thing, or a bird which may be eaten, he shall pour it out on the blood and cover it with earth. All right, verse 14. For it is the life of all flesh. Its blood sustains its life. Therefore I said to Israel's seed, he's always talking to Israel's seed, you shall not eat the blood of any flesh, for the life of the flesh is in the blood. Whoever eats it shall be cut off. Well, this would, I guess I would just have to say, if it's not brought to Yehovah, it doesn't matter if we're clean or unclean. We can eat it. I will step out on that. Here, no, this is the last one. This is the one that has the meat that dies of itself or is torn by beasts. Again, very interesting to see how this all fits together. And I wonder if there's something that's gone wrong here. Bear with me for a second, see if you see what I see. He says this, and every person. This time it doesn't say man. It says, and all nefesh. And every person. And every soul. You could say it like that, but he's still going to talking about men. that eats that which dies of itself, or that which is torn by beasts, as a native of your own country, as an Ezra. Okay, this is what we're talking about, every soul, as an Ezra, or as a ger. He shall wash his clothes, bathe himself in water, and be tameh, be unclean, until evening, then he shall be tehar, then he shall be clean. Notice, he's still talking about the Ezra and the ger, but this is the first time that he's not saying any man, he's saying any flesh. Interesting. But what's really interesting here is what I showed you already. We had the house of Israel, and the ger, the house of Israel and the ger again, and then we had the Israel's seed and the ger, and now we have the Ezra and the ger. Do you see how they all fit together? It's really quite amazing. For the first time, it does not say man, man. Here it says every person, but then describes them as either an Ezra or a ger. Does this seem like a bit of a contradiction? Bear with me for a second. Do you think this seems like a bit of a contradiction? Remember, what is he saying here? Let's just understand again what he's saying. Every person that eats that which dies of itself, or which is torn to beasts. So we got two things: dies of itself, or is torn by beasts. Says he can eat it as an Ezra or a ger, and he shall be clean. So now look at what it says here. Is this a contradiction? Now, first I thought this was a contradiction. Whatever dies naturally or is torn by beasts, he shall not eat, to defile himself with it. I am Yehovah. Well, first I thought he was talking to Israel's seed, but then I realized he's talking to the priests. Makes perfect sense. If it's going to make you unclean, he doesn't want his priests to be unclean. Don't give it to the priests. Priests don't eat things that die of themselves or things that are torn by beasts. Look at the second one. Here it is. And you shall be holy men to me. Holy men to me. He's talking to Israel. You shall not, he's talking to Israel, the Ezra men. Not the ger, just the Ezra men. You shall not eat meat torn in the field. You shall throw it to the dogs. Reminds me of a couple chickens that our dogs got. One was our dogs that got to it. The other one was dogs that a neighbor got to, or a chicken that our neighbor dogs got to. We slaughtered both of those and ate it. But now I look at this and I think, oops, maybe we weren't supposed to do that. Just hate the meat to go to waste. I suppose we should have given it to a neighbor, because look at what the very next thing says. That was written to the Ezra men. This is written to the Ezra men also. Look what it says. You shall not eat anything that dies of itself. Now, we're not talking about torn. We're talking about dies of itself. He says, you may give it to the ger who is within your gates. Ezra men can't eat it, but the ger can eat it. Isn't that interesting? That he may eat it, or you may sell it to and ben nakar. For you are a holy people to Yehovah your Elohim. You shall not boil a young goat in its mother's milk. Well, they're just adding that to it. Didn't make it a separate verse. So what do we do? What do we do? Can we eat things that remember, I'm still talking to the Ezra. We talk about the ger, but I'm talking about Ezra men right now. Do the Ezra men eat things that dies of itself or is torn? Looks to me that we don't do either. But here, it says every person who eats what died naturally or what was torn by beasts, whether, well, it doesn't even say whether, a native of your land, the Ezra, or a stranger. How did they word it? Let's go up here. A native of your own country, or as a native of your own country, or as a ger, it says he shall wash his clothes and bathe himself with water and be unclean until evening. Oh, interesting. Well, let's continue. Last verse. But if he does not wash them or bathe his body, then he shall bear his guilt. I think I translated that too. If he washes not his clothes, them, okay, when they say them, it doesn't say them, but I think it's right, because we're talking about he shall both wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. But if he does not wash them, I put if he does not wash his clothes, just to cure who them are. Them, it makes me think of people instead of clothes, them clothes. Nor bathe his flesh, he shall bear his, they said, sin, his guilt. This is his avan, his perversity, his evil. Well, here's where we are. This is where we find ourselves today. You know what's interesting? Jehovah doesn't say anything about fish, does he? He tells us clean fish are what? Things that have fins and things that have scales. Things from the water that have fins and scales. If they don't have fins and scales, they're not clean. But he doesn't say anything about the blood. He doesn't say anything about how they're supposed to be killed. We can eat those. The birds, the wild beasts are a little bit different. And the domestic animals, the clean four-legged animals, the behemah, the clean behemah. Do we eat things that were slaughtered according to the USDA? Rather than a man of Israel or the ger who dwells with them slaughtering their food for their families? Folks, I think Jehovah cares about the animals and us more. You know what? They can't put hormones in our meat if we raise our meat. They can't put things in slaughtered meat to poison the population if we're the ones that are slaughtering it. Can they? This keeps us safe. But more importantly, we're doing what Jehovah taught us to do. Slaughter our meat, put the blood in the ground. If we're close to him, bring it to him, slaughter it before him. If we're not, then we still slaughter it. And then we can eat it, both the clean and the unclean alike. Well, I hope this changes some things in your life. I learned this 3 years ago, and since then I've had hardly any meat at all. Hardly any. Have I been perfect in all this? No. I already told you I had a chicken that I slaughtered or ate here just a few days ago. He might still, part of it still be in the freezer. Don't know which one it is because we had 2 in 1 week that we slaughtered. But raising our own chickens, which is why we're doing it. For meat. For the bone broth that we can make. For the different things that we get from the animal. Jehovah's provision for us. But if we eat it, we slaughter it. I think that's where it has to be. We can buy it and then slaughter it. I remember a few years ago, I bought a goat and had it slaughtered and made sausage out of it. And I really think, now that I think about it, that sausage, even though it was absolutely delicious, had pork in it. I'll bet it did. I'll bet it did. Blah. Well, you know what? We do so much because we do it not in accordance with Yahovah's statutes and judgments and ordinances. There's much for us to learn. Next week, look at what we're going to talk about next week. This is sexual sins. Ooh, pretty interesting stuff. And if we get to the next chapter, that's going to be just miscellaneous instructions. You're going to like sexual sins and the things that we can learn there. 20 is going to talk about a lot of the same things that we're going to talk about in 18 as well. All right. Well, thank you for joining me, everybody. We're going to stop here. It's only 1:41, but we covered a lot of good stuff today. All right. Well, love you tons. Have a great day. Bye now.